Based on the evidence presented, this court finds you guilty as charged.
Judge sentenced silent black teen to life, but his one phone call exposed everything. A silent courtroom. A black teenager staring down a life sentence. No words, no defense, just the bang of the gavel sealing his fate. But when he was granted just one phone call, he didn't call his mom. He didn't call a lawyer. He called someone no one expected, and within 72 hours, the judge was under investigation, 3 officers were arrested, and America was watching. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. The truth is louder than a sentence. Don't scroll. What you're about to hear will shake your faith in the system, and then restore it. Please support us by subscribe, like, and share for more with activating the notification bell. Thank you. The courtroom was quiet, so quiet, you could hear the creak of the wooden benches as reporters leaned forward, waiting for what they assumed would be a standard ruling. On trial was 17-year-old Micah Brooks, a soft-spoken, straight-A student from Southside Atlanta. He stood there in an oversized suit donated by a church member, hands cuffed, head slightly lowered. Micah had barely spoken a word throughout the entire trial. His public defender said he was difficult and non-cooperative, but people close to Micah knew better. He was scared. Not of prison, but of the entire system. Micah had been accused of armed robbery at a gas station. The store clerk, white, panicked, had identified him on grainy surveillance footage, and that was all the prosecution needed. No fingerprints. No weapon. Just a teenager who fit the description. The judge, Harold Denton, was known for being tough on youth crime. He barely looked Micah in the eyes as he spoke the words, "I hereby sentence you to life in prison, without the possibility of parole." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Micah's mother collapsed in the back row. And Micah? He didn't flinch. He just nodded. That's when the bailiff leaned in and said quietly, "You get one phone call." Micah sat in the holding cell with the jail phone in front of him. The guard assumed he'd call his mother. Or maybe a lawyer. But instead, he dialed a number from memory, one that no one expected. Ring, ring. "Hello," a woman answered. Micah spoke one line, "It happened. I need you to tell them everything." Then he hung up. That woman's name was Naomi West, a retired FBI analyst and family friend who had been quietly mentoring Micah since he was 12. She had trained him to think critically, to write, to read court documents. She had also been investigating corruption in Georgia's juvenile court system, quietly, after watching too many black boys vanish behind bars. Within 6 hours of Micah's call, Naomi emailed a file marked confidential to multiple journalists, civil rights attorneys, and 2 sitting congressmen. It included evidence that Judge Harold Denton had sentenced black minors to life at 5x the rate of white minors. An internal police memo showing detectives knew the store's surveillance timestamp was altered. Phone records proving Micah wasn't even in the city during the robbery. And, most shocking, an anonymous whistleblower statement from a retired officer claiming the department had quotas for locking up black youth before election seasons. By midnight, hashtags were trending. Hashtag free Micah, hashtag dismantle Denton, hashtag system on trial and Micah? He sat in his cell, still silent. By the next morning, CNN, The Shade Room, and BBC News were running segments on Micah Brooks. Journalists surrounded the courthouse. Protesters gathered outside with signs reading, "A phone call isn't a weapon, but it can bring justice." The pressure was immediate. Judge Denton issued a weak statement, "We stand by the rule of law and proper process." But within hours, Denton was placed under internal review. Civil rights attorney Chloe Mensa, a Harvard grad and courtroom firebrand, filed an emergency appeal demanding Micah's release pending investigation. The mayor of Atlanta, caught in a storm of backlash, called for a special hearing. Then came the leaked body cam footage, the original arrest. Officers could be heard laughing as they forced Micah to the ground. "Another one off the street. That's a win for re-election," one officer joked. People were furious. Then the real shock came. The retired officer who'd anonymously leaked the statement came forward publicly. His name? Detective Leroy Grant. A 30-year veteran. In an emotional live interview, he said, "I stayed quiet too long. But that boy Micah, he's innocent. And this system isn't broken, it was built this way." As the investigation spiraled, the focus turned back to Micah. He was granted a new hearing, this time with a real legal team, funded by donations pouring in from across the world. Naomi West sat behind him. Chloe Mensa stood before the judge, who was not Denton. He had been suspended pending further review. This time, the courtroom listened. Mensa laid out the facts. Micah's GPS from his prepaid phone placed him 60 miles away from the robbery. Eyewitnesses had never clearly identified him. And most damning, the supposed security footage had a timestamp that was off by 2 hours, and store logs showed no cash missing. The courtroom was dead silent. Then the judge leaned forward and asked, "Micah, do you have anything to say?" Micah stood up. For the first time, he spoke in court. "I didn't say anything before, because I knew no one would listen. I stayed silent because I've seen how this system works. But maybe silence was the loudest thing I could do." His words brought tears to eyes, including his mother's, watching from the front row. The judge struck the gavel. "The charges are vacated. Mr. Brooks is free to go." The courtroom erupted. Micah walked out of jail into a crowd of thousands. Reporters shouted, people wept, signs waved. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He took the microphone and said one thing: "Don't just free me, free them. All of them. Every kid like me still locked up with no voice." That night, 3 officers were arrested for tampering with evidence. Judge Denton was disbarred and later indicted on civil rights violations. Congressional hearings began on systemic sentencing disparities, and Micah's law was introduced to prevent juvenile life sentencing without DNA or hard evidence. Micah turned down all book and movie deals. Instead, he started a nonprofit called The First Call, helping wrongly accused youth access legal support and mentorship. Naomi West became his senior advisor. And Micah. He went on to study criminal justice. Quiet still, but powerful. One boy. One call. One truth that shattered an entire courtroom and built something better in its place. If you believe in justice, don't let this story stop here. Share it. Because silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And sometimes, one phone call is all it takes to start a revolution.